Okay, good morning, everybody. Going to go ahead and get started. We'll probably still have other people join us, but we have a lot to cover and to talk about today. So I just want to jump into the agenda. And speaking of the agenda, here's just quickly what we're going to be talking about today. Um, so we want to get a quick update from the broadband office on what's happening since uh, with all the changes to BEAD. And so Kelly's going to give us a quickie update about that. Um, and then we're going to do a panel discussion today on the impact of the Commerce Department's new NOFO and BEAD restructuring policy notice. And we'll get a quickie update from Lucy Howe about this CEO Force for the Health source Force for Health network that we're working on with AZBSN and the Force for Health. Um, and so just quickly, excuse me. So just quickly, upcoming meetings. Well, first of all, I want to mention that next meetings, the meetings are June 12th and the 19th. There will be no meeting on June 26th since I will be on vacation and traveling. And gee, I'll have to be on a lake in Minnesota. Um, and of course, no meeting on July the 3rd. So we'll be back after July the 3rd. So we'll have a 2 week hiatus. And so I just wanted to tell you about that. And then just some upcoming meetings with some dates to be determined. On July 17th, we're great. It's great to welcome Joey Wender, who's the new executive director of the Schools Health and Libraries Broadband Coalition. And he has agreed. I had a chance to meet Joey at the NDIA conference a few weeks ago. And so he has agreed to come and meet with us. And then several months ago, actually, we had talked about doing a discussion about public networks. What are they, pros and cons, and so forth. And it looks like we're going to do that. Don't have a date yet. Gigi Sohn, who many of you know is the executive director of the American Association of Public Broadband, she's probably one of the most knowledgeable about issues regarding public networks. And so I actually saw her at the conference, and she has agreed to meet with us also. So I will be getting that scheduled after the hiatus when I'm on vacation. And then I'm also going to schedule a time for Ryan Murray, who's been with us before. Ryan is the deputy director and chief is the deputy director and chief information security officer for the Arizona Department of Homeland Security. Ryan has been with us before. If anybody knows what's happening in cybersecurity here in Arizona, who are all the players, what people are doing, it's Ryan. So he has agreed also, and I need to schedule a date for him. So those are just some of the things that are coming up in the future, hopefully in July. But we'll see when I get back. We'll see where we are with everything with BEAD and everything else. So, but that's tentatively some of the upcoming meetings. So the next thing, quickly, I just want to remind you, and you probably saw this in my newsletter, that last week we were pleased to again welcome Judy Soltrup, who is the Northern Arizona Outreach and Constituent Services Coordinator for Senator Kelly. Judy tries to participate in this task force whenever she can, and she did ask us to, in order to help support the senators' advocacy efforts in the Senate. And of course, at that time we were talking about DEA funding. Now we've got another issue in talking about BEAD. So she has asked that we send emails to the senator, to her for the senator, with stories that describe how the funding terminations are impacting your plans, your organization, initiatives, and constituents. And her information is below. And she would like that sooner rather than later. because of all the stuff that's happening in Washington these days. So, um, moving on, I want to briefly introduce David Ackerman, who's the CEO of ACG Engineering, and they have a grant to be able to provide technical assistance support. And so he's going to take 2 minutes to tell us who they are. Matt Combs is also with, or Coombs, is it?
Yeah, it's Coons.
So Matt Coombs and David Ackerman are going to give us a 2 minute overview, and then we'll have him back at a future time. David, please.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everybody, for letting me have this quick moment. I really just wanted to introduce myself and an excellent opportunity that I think everyone on this call will be interested in. So, like Steve said, my name is David Ackerman, CEO, founder of Ackerman Consulting Group. We're a broadband consulting and engineering firm. We partner with rural and tribal communities, ISPs, public entities, and our whole purpose is to help get meaningful broadband projects funded and built. So BEAD is kind of the big topic right now. So if you're looking at BEAD, whether it's community, ISP, whatever, and you need help navigating the federal process or engineering design, grant writing, etc., let's talk. I'll put my info in the chat after this. The main thing I wanted to talk about is we're recently awarded the USDA BTA, which is the Broadband Technical Assistance Grant, to support efforts in Arizona, specifically 9 counties: Apache, Cochise, Coconino, Greenlee, Maricopa, Mojave, Pima, Pinal, and Yuma. Our team is able to provide end-to-end support with everything from pre-screening and engineering to permitting and strategic planning. Real quick, we've also partnered with Rural Prosperity Partners. They are on this call, Rachel and Joe. They have a similar program that they are running up in Oregon. It's been wildly successful, and we're taking that here to Arizona. So if you or any organization that you know has any needs as far as technical broadband support, we have federal funding to support that. And again, I'll just drop my info in the chat. Thank you very much, Steve.
Sure. So David and Rachel, as long as you're on the call, Rachel, so can you guys talk about, now that we've got all these changes to be and a pretty tight timeline, are you guys going to be able to help people in the current environment?
So yeah, David, it's a timing and grant issue. So we're waiting. I think David is waiting for the final go ahead from USDA. As you all know, there's a lot of administrative stuff in there, but I believe that we will be able to. So let me just give you a 2-second rundown. So in Oregon, Rural Prosperity Partners, and we're a technical assistance firm, and we focus on rural communities and helping them secure funding. We have a huge focus on broadband, but we do a lot of other things as well that are non-broadband. And so basically we got the first cooperative agreement in the nation from USDA to run broadband technical assistance. The BTA program is actually, the competitive one is actually based off of our pilot work in Oregon. And the goals are kind of like one is to provide like pre-screening training and making sure people are ready to apply for grants and loans, right? So internet service providers, whether that's a jurisdiction or an ISP or a tribe, and to subsidize the cost of the technical assistance needed to do those applications, because we know it can cost anywhere from $50,000 to $90,000 to do these things. And so our goal is to help actors in rural communities secure that funding and subsidize that cost. And then another component of this is actually providing training to communities so that your elected officials and other stakeholders have the knowledge that they need to help support and move these issues forward. And so we've leveraged a $500,000 grant in Oregon and secured $30 million in funding for folks through the Oregon pilot. So the Arizona pilot is based on our learnings and our model from Oregon, and we are super excited, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward with supporting around BEAD. Like I think David is just waiting on the final paperwork. So.
And Rachel and David, I will actually talk to you. Maybe we need to actually accelerate having you guys do a more detail if you think you need it, maybe as soon as next week. just because of all the changes now that are happening, B, the timelines and so forth. So let's talk offline. I don't want to take time this morning, but thank
Sounds
you
good.
guys for being here.
Yeah, real quick, Steve, the grants that are in jeopardy, the BTA grant has not been mentioned at all as far as removing funding or whatnot. So we're here to help. So far, so good. I think that was one of your main questions there is how does that affect the grant funding? So it is in force and ready to start helping as soon as next week.
And that was a USDA grant, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
Rural development. Yep. USDA rural development.
Okay. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
All right. Thank you for the time, Steve.
You bet. So let's move on. Kelly, you want to give us a quickie update? Obviously, we're going to go into a lot of detail about the recent changes to BEAD, but can you give us a quickie update on where the broadband office is today?
Yes, of course. Good morning. My name is Kelly Crucy, Community Engagement Manager for the State Broadband Office. And I do want to say thank you for sharing about the Broadband Technical Assistance Grant. That's great information. We did have a tribe ask us if we had heard anything about that, maybe like a month ago. So anyway, this is great. Looking forward to connecting on that. Okay, so yes, big things are happening. And we sent out an email notification on, trying to think of what day it was. It's been a crazy week. So on Tuesday of this week, an email notice went out. I'm going to lead with the email notice because as I am saying in every meeting, if you did not get that notice from the Arizona Commerce Authority, and you would like to, please put your email in the chat. I'll pick it up. I will add it. Really trying to make sure that we're capturing everyone in our communications. So this email went out on Tuesday. And at this point in time, the steps that we are taking, there are a few. The first is that our round 2 application window, which opened on June 3rd, just 9 days ago, is suspended. So that application window is suspended while we are determining what our next steps are. We are also looking at round 1. What happens with that? Nick, our director, has spent the past few days at a conference learning more information about this and having conversations with people in DC, which is great, asking some specific questions. So we're excited to have a webinar tomorrow. And I'll put that link in the chat after I'm done speaking. And this webinar will kind of go over, what the changes are, where things are, and what are the direction of where we're going, and answer any questions. And I will just say what every state broadband office is saying at this point in time, which is it's a lot of change in a short amount of time. We are all trying to wrap our heads around this and determine the next steps. We want to do the best thing for our state, for the tribes, for the counties, for the people in Arizona. The goal remains the same of 100% connectivity. How we're doing that definitely has changed. So the game has changed completely, and we are trying to quickly respond and be as proactive as we can while being reactive, but not losing sight of that ultimate goal. And we definitely need the help of the applicants in this, and we don't want folks to lose interest. The intent is the same, and we need the support and the partnership of everybody in this. Don't want to lose those round 1 applicants. So again, assessing where we are. Join us tomorrow. It will be a good conversation. We will try to get those questions answered, but we also need to know, what your questions are, what your thoughts are, and get that input from you as we all work through this and determine the best way to do this. There's 90 days we are to do this, and we are, if we're counting down, on day 85. So it's happening fast, and we want to be fast, but we want to be smart and strategic in this, and need your input to do that. So tomorrow is the webinar. We'll have some good conversations and, share what we've got at that point. And like I said, things will be moving fast. So my ask of this group is, if you didn't get that email, please let me know. Put your email in the chat. I will get you added to our contact list. And then I'll put that link in the chat if Aaron didn't beat me to it. Thank you, Aaron, for tomorrow's webinar. And I'll also get, whoever attends tomorrow's webinar will be added to our contact list as well.
Thanks, Kelly. Any quick questions for Kelly? So just a reminder, because she mentioned the chat several times, that you can download the chat to your computer at the end of the meeting if you want to. If you go to chat at the very top, there's three ellipses, three dots, and if you click on that, you can download the chat, and so it'll have all the links and contacts and all of that sort of stuff in the chat because it's hard to remember everybody, capture all that information. I will try to get that information out. However, I am having major computer problems at the moment, so I'm having a lot of challenges in being able to deal with stuff. But anyway, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. So moving on, we're going to do away with a lot of our other updates this morning because we do have a lot to cover. So I'm pleased to have a panel discussion on the impact of the Commerce Department's new NOFO and BEAD restructuring policy notice, as Kelly referenced. So we're pleased to have Randy Leaning, got it right this time, right, Randy? Who is the founder of Broadband Toolkit. Randy has been attending pretty regularly our meetings and appreciate his participation this morning. And then we have Reed Sharkey, who is back again with us, who is the community broadband specialist and research associate at the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society. And Reed is, obviously following closely on what's happening with BEAD. And then Mark Goldstein, who's president of International Research Center and chair of the Arizona Telecommunications and Information Council. Mark did an excellent job yesterday at the ATIC board meeting in talking about what was happening. And we could have gone on for a lot longer. So this is the time for us to really try and get into some details about what's happening and where we're going and what the implications are as we know it as of today or yesterday, as the case might be. So we're going to just jump right into that panel discussion. Any questions or comments before we do that? Okay, so I want to highlight Spotlight. And where is Randy? Where are you? There's Randy. And Spotlight and Mark. Hopefully I can add another. There we go. Okay, so here's our panel this morning. And I want to kick it off this morning with Randy kind of giving us a quick start on where we are, what's going on, what the implications are for this, for all these changes, and to kind of put some things in perspective. There's lots of issues, lots of implications. And so between Randy, Mark, and Reed, that hopefully we can give you as much information as we can today and what we know today. This is kind of, as you know, we've done a series, what we know, what we think we know, and what we don't know. And now it's what we know and wish we didn't. And so with that, I'm going to just turn it over to Randy. Randy, did you want to share?
Yeah, I did. No, thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. And let's see.
And I just want to say,
what I've done is, and this can be flexed and adapted, but what I did is I put together a short series of slides, sort of highlighting what to me were the most captivating elements of each section and talking a bit about the organization. And we could go through all of that or part of that, but it's designed to be sort of a machine gun introduction to to what is what jumps out, at least to me, and I think everyone who reads it will have slightly different takeaways.
Randy, if I can interrupt for 1 second.
Yes.
So all these guys have very impressive credentials, but just because of time, I'm not going to go into all their background because it would take up half the meeting being able to do that. So I just wanted to just say that it's not that I don't recognize all these guys. It just don't want to take the time. So anyway, go on, Randy.
Okay, and maybe if I do say five minutes of just machine gun, and then we can pull back and digest it. So basically, I was going to try to step through just a little bit about the organization, what was released in the organization, some of the the highlights by section, and then after that, I have some broad sort of integration questions which we could either get to or not, but I sort of conceptually put those towards the end when we after we've had other discussion. So basically, you can tell a lot just from the pagination here. Basically, the what's called the NTIA BEAD restructuring policy notice, which came out last Friday, has a press release and then a fact sheet, and then this document that's about 23 pages long, and the background and purpose is just very short. There's several pages on elimination of regulatory barriers, or that's the way it's called. And they're each treating a specific policy and clawing it back to some extent. A large portion of the document is related to technology neutrality. Some sort of presents the conceptual piece, and other sections talk about the implications for broadband offices. So we can kind of step through that a little bit. So these are the things that are regulatory requirements that are changed, and I won't go through them in a lot of detail, but they basically take each area where I think the new administration is looking back at the original NOFO and saying this expressing the belief that this overstepped regulations or should be clawed back in some fashion. So in each of these areas you see that happening. And just as an example, for instance, with the middle class affordability plan, which was part of the NOFO, that's gone. Things like the low cost service option, they're asking entity to be kind of less specific in terms of pricing, and for instance the eligibility is shrunken from one that was tied to the affordable connectivity plan to one that's tied to Lifeline, which has a smaller eligibility window. So I won't go into a lot of detail because but we could come back to these if desired. One of the very interesting pieces is those of you who were intimately familiar with the original NOFO probably remember the concept of a priority broadband project, which in that context was defined as fiber. So it was 100% fiber. And so every state broadband office, sort of by and large, went through a process of doing a kind of a fiber bidding cycle, and then things that fell out, subsequent cycles as part of the the subgrantee selection process. So here they're redefining it, and this statement says nothing about fiber. It has the download speed, upload speed, latency, and then it has some text which is potentially consequential, talking about it can easily scale speeds over time to meet the evolving connectivity needs of households and businesses. And again, a household may be fine with 100 down. If you're a hospital with doing MRIs every day, not and then and support the development of 5G. So the idea that the investment now supports other infrastructures, and we'll come back to this in a moment. And then I'm sort of going largely serially through this, and again, it's 23 pages, so just grabbing a few things that are highlights. There's a statement up front here where it says eligible entities may not categorically exclude any given technology. So suddenly a very broad tent in terms of technology. But then it goes on and and talks about some of the caveats there, and the NTIA reserves the right to reverse an eligible entity's determination that a project does or does not meet the standard for a priority broadband project if such determination is unreasonable. So what's interesting is this is actually a two-sided sword. So if you said we're going to include all of these, flavors of technology, and and you included people that were not credible, the NTI could reverse that. On the other hand, if you were prescriptive and excluded people that they felt should be included, they could reverse that too. But it's a so and then what else is interesting is it also goes on to describe the concept of a non-priority broadband project. And this is also interesting because we've already said that in theory all technologies are welcome, but there are projects that sort of fail to meet this priority definition, and they're called non-priority. Okay, so that's interesting. It goes on and talks about the extremely high cost per location threshold, which was part of a critical part of the original NOFO. And the idea is you would deploy fiber up until you hit the dollar threshold there, and then you do other technologies. And then also there's the idea that awards stop if a project cost is excessive. And within the text of the NOFO, they actually cite Nevada was one of the three that had completed their subgrantee selection, and they indicated an extremely high cost threshold of 200,000, and so they actually called that out as excessive. So but again, that's something that is just sort of a judgment call. What technologies are available? You have fiber, cable, LEO satellite, licensed or unlicensed spectrum, or hybrid. And this replaces what was previously a tiered structure of fiber, and then other quote unquote reliable technologies, and then alternative. So this is some conceptual changes. And this I sort of pulled up in terms of sequence. There's a discussion in Appendix A of unlicensed, and basically even though the technology is allowed, there are certain hurdles that people need to go through if they're doing that, and certain demonstrations they need to make. There's similarly a section on LEO satellite rules, and one of the interesting pieces is they talk about low Earth satellite in terms of capacity subgrants. And part of the concept is if you're deploying infrastructure, whether it's fiber or wireless, the government can have an interest in that physical hardware that they've deployed. With satellite, that's not possible. And so what they do is they have what they call reserved capacity and a 10-year period of performance. They require them to advertise. Adoption is sort of tied into the methodology of how they're compensated. They need to activate in 10 days, like other technologies, and they're required to pay for the installation of the CPE and for the CPE itself, which if you're a fiber provider or any other provider, you often do that, but it's not required. And
Randy, can I make one point about satellite?
Yeah.
It's that they would have the same 4 years, up to 4 years, that other physical infrastructure builders were to reach the capacities needed. They don't need those capacities going in to apply, but like any other applicant, would have up to a full 4 years. Now, they may choose to commit to shorter timeframes. There may be a benefit as a secondary priority if they do.
No, that's a great point. And even like Kuiper has, with Nevada, they committed to an in-service date of December 31st, 2026, I think. So, but there will definitely be new entrants, very important new entrants there.
Randy, if I can
Yeah.
interrupt 1 second. So Mark and Reed, certainly feel free if you need to embellish upon something. But again, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So, feel
Sure,
free.
I assume we'll go round robin a little more, but just while he was on satellite, I thought that was
No, it's fine, Mark. I'm just
important.
saying that if you find a place where we need to embellish on something, please do. I don't want us to,
Okay, I'm not
have to
shy.
wait.
And
Okay.
I can, the other thing too is we can um we could go go back or whatever. So I know there's for everything that I'm saying, there's probably 10 times as much content. So I was just trying to to blast through this. The other thing that's very consequential is there's a what they call the benefit of the bargain round. So they're basically, even though a lot of states have done or either started or completed subgrantee selection, basically they're asking for the process to be restarted, and you can take all of your pre-qualified applicants and keep them in the qualification list, but the door needs to be open to new applicants, and there's also a requirement to put together essentially a revised map. So there are a whole bunch of things that need to happen, and what's very consequential here is that there's a 90-day window for for a state to do this, which is extremely compressed given the year or so that they've had previously. Um, and there are two things that are related to this that sort of jump out to me. One is they ask that the cost for the programs or for the requirements that they've disallowed are essentially pulled out. So they're not going to, let's say, fund someone to do something that was environmental, which they're now saying is not required, or just or fell in one of the other categories. The other thing that's potentially very consequential is that applicants have the right to exclude specific broadband serviceable locations if they feel the cost is excessive. So just as a fabric of how do you go in and make decisions. This you have priority and then non-priority and then these excluded BSLs.
Can I
Um,
note something there, Randy?
yeah, you bet.
Um, th those unallowable costs, you mentioned the applicants that are pre-qualified, and then if they submitted an application in an early round, like some states have already run, including Arizona, they somewhere in the notice they say that you could leave those applications and re-adjudicate them under new rules. But because of these excluded costs, it seems to me very unlikely that any
Right.
such application would succeed. So it's because of these, because you would have factored in these environmental costs that are now unallowable, which would just make the project really expensive under these new rules.
Yeah, and there are a lot of, and that's a great, and what's interesting, there are a lot of conflicts, sort of soft conflicts in terms of the objectives that are described here. Um, and then, 10 days to deploy, that's pretty standard. The scoring rubric is a new concept which is discussed here. And basically it has an emphasis on low cost, which again is juxtaposed against specific requirements. And also there's what they call secondary criteria, the idea that if something's within a 15% margin, you can consider things like speed to deployment, network capabilities, and also give deference to someone who has been an existing applicant. So this is sort of giving some allowance to the fact that states have spent a year pouring their hearts into this and have a bunch of results, and people have pre-qualified, and so there's some deference to that. Um, and then just a tiny bit on the map. So basically, if unlicensed are suddenly allowed, then that has implications for what you consider served and unserved and underserved. And also, they're asking people to go back and revisit enforceable commitments, and are those current? So there are several things that they're asking them to revisit in terms of the map, and then to republish that. And again, the timelines here are astounding, but 14 days, from the from the public notice, this stuff needs to come out. And also some changes to anchor institutions. And then just very simple things that appear in there. Non-deployment funding is sort of on TBD, and they have a new process for permitting, which yeah, I know. I think Mark, you talked about this, or I think someone did, but anyway, those are our things designed to accelerate things. So anyway, let me stop, and why don't we rewind to areas of interest? But that was sort of an effort to just get through the overall package and identify what's there, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
I guess I'd like to dig a little deeper on what Randy has mentioned about the state's BSL list, what will be the eligible locations for BEAD, because there are two big changes. Now, the state worked from the FCC data as massaged and transformed by CostQuest to generate a baseline map. They went through an extensive challenge process, and that challenge process need not be repeated. And I don't expect anyone will, given these timeframes. But there are two big changes to that established baseline BSL list for the state. One is that I believe NTIA themselves will provide a list of formally unavailable locations that had what's called an enforceable commitment, an RDOF grant assigned to it, or possibly some other grants that have failed. A lot of RDOF has been given back. Lumen just gave back 8 states, not Arizona, all of their RDOF awards. I'm sure there are some in Arizona. So RDOF failures and other grant failures will be identified as specific BSLs that the state will have to incorporate, assuming there's no current map data that says that there is a eligible broadband of 100/20 being delivered. But on the other side, the big change in making unlicensed wireless, formerly licensed wireless, was an eligible technology, just not favored in the fiber heavy prioritization. Now that unlicensed wireless is allowed, there are probably tens of thousands of BSLs in Arizona alone that are receiving or able to receive, I should say, 100/20 service that have been declared under what on an FCC 477 report. I believe it's under Code 70, Tech Code 70. It's probably going to be the June 30th, 2024 data. They haven't processed the December 31st, 2024 data yet. So whatever that snapshot of declared coverage from unlicensed wireless providers from June 2024, that has to be looked at, and the state has to basically post a notice that says, here are all the unlicensed wireless points that we could add to the map. Unlicensed providers, do you want them? Do you want to claim them, basically? They'll have 7 days to claim them, and then 7 days to provide some detailed justification about the quality of their service. But when you look at how many BSLs there are, you can actually expect tens of thousands of them are likely to come off the Arizona map. So I think that is an important change we're going to see that I wanted to drill a little deeper on.
And in addition, the list will change for many states up on their CAI list. And in that notice,
Right.
they revert to the original definition of what can be called a community anchor institution, which is outlined in the original NOFO, but allowed states to expand on the CAI list if they wanted to be more inclusive and include other kinds of organizations. They've now said that that's not allowed. So states who had adopted a more expansive view of what a CAI can be will now have
Like
to
community centers or senior living
exactly,
facilities.
yeah, or a hunting lodge.
Right.
They'll need to go back and remove them from the list. So and we've talked about lots of these things that are going to just create a burden for states. And I commend you all at the ACA for getting, moving really quickly and getting communications out and scheduling ways to do outreach. But the timeline, the way I see it is just it's insane ask.
Yeah.
Because you're asking 30 days for a new initial proposal. You're going to have to redo your map. You're going to have to have a 30-day public comment period when you finish your subgrantee selection, and all this while you're running your entire subgrantee selection process. So we're really it's going to be interesting to see the different approaches that states take to try and meet the ask, I think. And maybe the kind of loosening of the requirements will allow for subgrantees to submit applications really quickly because they will have to factor less in terms of the labor requirements and the environmental requirements into their bids. But that's kind of one of the big takeaways for me is this timeline is it's the math is not so simple to me.
On the CAIs though, and Reed, you raised the legitimate point about them going to be more strict in the definition of CAIs. What I don't see in here is any mention of the gigabit per second service capabilities that I believe were in NOFO 1. And since there's no non-deployment funding likely to be available when they finally define their TBD, but I'm guessing that's the way they'll go. The states are likely to have a lot of leftover money that's subject to
Right.
clawback or other processes, but they may have more flexibility in CAI investment, infrastructure investment at the back end
That's
based
true.
on the excess funding. And
Right.
so I don't yet understand if that's going to play that way, but I have kind of it could well be that states then have a lot of money to look at CAI direct connections at the gigabit rate. I'm quite uncertain. I doubt ACA even has that answer yet, but if Kelly does, uh, that would be great. I'm sure Nick and she are closer to NTIA direction, but there may be an upside on the CAI equation from that.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a great point.
I think, Reed, you mentioned too some conflicts in objectives here, right? Like, I think, there, that would probably be something for us to unpack when we look at the overall set of requirements or the things that sort of seem to stand in opposition to one another.
Yeah.
And then Randy touched on the affordability, but I think we should go just a little deeper on that. There's
Mhm.
no longer a middle class affordability. It wasn't in statute, and this NTIA has eliminated that. On the low cost option for needy consumers, um, they have changed from allowing the states to have some or a good bit of leverage in trying to enforce and get a low price for the low cost plan to saying hands off. Neither explicitly or implicitly can the state influence or demand or request specific rate points, and it's totally up to the provider. So a terrestrial provider that's wireless could come in and say, well, I have a $30 plan. A satellite provider could say, my normal plan's 125, low cost is $90. And there's no scoring benefit either in the primary or secondary criteria that says that any affordability that's better than another project can be considered in the scoring. So there's really a torpedo in the whole idea of affordability and having any policy influence to totally leaving it at the applicant's discretion what a low cost plan would consist of.
Yeah, that's a very good point to bring up. And I would even maybe go further. The way I read it is if the satellite provider's regular plan option is $120, that's the low cost plan option. But I
If
don't
they
read
want,
any
yeah.
way that they couldn't just specify whatever happens to their lowest cost plan at 120 megabits per second. That qualifies. That meets the
Right.
statutory requirement. So affordability took a big hit on this policy notice. I think you're right to bring that up. If there are any questions or want to dig deeper on satellite, that's kind of and the what we know about um, kind of the way that satellite providers have been applying in the BEAD program to the extent that we know, and previous programs like the main program. Um, I've that's one focus I've had over the past couple days is trying to now understand because of this one sole focus on cost. It seems there is if satellite wants to serve a group of locations, they're going to be able to win. In most cases, maybe in some areas where, for example, Starlink in the Pacific Northwest, where they have limited capacity, maybe they struggle to reserve capacity there at an affordable level to them, and maybe a terrestrial provider can win out. We don't know, but from what we can tell, there's a pretty large variance in cost per location in applications that LEO providers have made, Kuiper and Starlink, kind of ranging between in RDOF, Starlink was around just over 1,500, I think, per location. Yeah, 1,600 per location. But then in other areas are over $5,000. Kuiper has been between $3,000, and then in Louisiana, their alternative technology proposal in BEAD was $10,000 per location. So there's this really large range of cost per location on satellite applications, and that could be due to a number of things. I think we're still learning exactly what they're factoring in. And now we know a little bit more because of this policy notice of what exactly they're going to have to pay for in terms of the CPE, and what they're going to be responsible for over the period of performance. But it still seems to me that in almost all cases, LEO providers, should they want a group of locations, will be able to get them under these new rules.
I'd like to push back on that just a bit. So one, I think their pricing was based on competing head to head with fiber only. Now they're going to have to compete with terrestrial wireless, even with cable systems that have hybrid fiber coax systems and so on. And I somewhat disagree about that they could be the lowest cost option anywhere. Anywhere that unlicensed or licensed or hybrid wireless providers already have some vertical assets in place, their cost to deployment per customer can be very aggressive. And they, in my mind, well, there's two things. One is, what is the capacity and interest of a satellite company going after 56 states and territories? What is their capacity to do that? What is their interest to do that in these short time frames? Where do they want to play? What is their business model going to drive? Right? They may go after 10% of the BEAD BSLs. They may go after 80% of the BEAD BSLs. Big bugaboo and unknown about their strategic positioning. But on the ground, on a head-to-head cost basis, I think terrestrial wireless providers in many cases can be competitive, and it's going to be a pricing war, a reverse auction almost between those two entities. But the net result, in my mind, is an initial estimate of 80+% being fiber deployment, now being 80+% non-fiber deployment. I don't know if the two of you agree on that flip-flop in the 80-20.
I can definitely, and yeah, too strong saying any location they want. The remote locations, I think would be a more sensible way of saying that.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
If I could jump in, Gordon Fuller in Tucson, astronomy, space science capital here of the world. The solar threat to satellites is so huge, it's so ridiculous. The idea of using this as our primary central infrastructure is a single point of failure, which is just so unacceptable. If you look at recent discoveries by the Max Planck Institute, who run the big solar telescope up on Kitt Peak, they discovered after looking at 56,000 suns like our own, that these things erupt with super flares every 100 years, not every 10,000 is what the satellite industry's bet on. And so it's the worst possible idea. Doesn't give us any infrastructure that we can count on as far as the future. And I'll put an article in the chat about
Great.
this.
Great
Thank you.
point.
Yeah.
And I'll weigh in, just very briefly too, is, we put out a white paper on satellites a few weeks ago. And one of the things is it's very tempting to look at the dollar figures and say, oh, satellite is better here or will dominate. But the problem is where satellite shines is in areas that are extremely sparse. It's the most rural areas in Arizona and Nevada. That's where it's a phenomenal solution. As you get into more denser areas, a satellite system, essentially has a certain capacity per unit area. And so, so to be cost effective, it serves very remote areas in the US and then similarly in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, and and it's literally just visible for a few minutes. The other thing interesting with satellite is with infrastructure on the ground, basically you have a capital cost, you know what that is, and so the reimbursement mechanism is very straightforward. With satellite, you've got many billions of dollars of investment, that those assets are made before the first customer goes live, and so it's almost like a fiber provider or wireless provider that already covers everyone that could be covered. And so there's a philosophical question of why are you funding satellite providers, and what's the basis for giving them extra money, but also it's something where if you didn't have them and you needed to put fiber into the most rural areas, then you're into the $100,000 or $200,000 per location, and so that's sort of the balance. So I think it's sort of looking at it just in dollars and cents is there are a lot of other factors that need to be considered in that balance.
Reed, maybe you would have some insight on this. To me, it seems like in the old model, the last mile costs and the middle mile costs were really separate. Your high cost threshold was for last mile connections, and your middle mile costs had kind of a weird capping formula, but it wasn't one we talked about when we talked about a per location fiber
Right.
cost. And now they seem to have bundled those costs together into a bucket that then divides by the number of BSLs. And thus, if you were bidding, as fiber, 5,000 a BSL, but you might have had another 2,000 or 5,000 in middle mile cost, that same proposal is going to show as a $7,000 to $10,000 per BSL cost, not a
Yeah.
$5,000 one. Is that how you would read that?
I think I haven't thought specifically very deeply about that, but it makes sense to me. And then you factor in the middle mile program that ran a few years ago.
Right.
Those investments were made with BEAD in mind. We built this fiber backbone, and now we're going to have this asset to use to expand fiber to even more places, whether it be directly to locations or to be the backbone for fixed wireless networks or 5G or whatnot. So I
But I
think
think
that's a
this
good
is a
point.
big pricing change for fiber
Yeah.
projects on the per location math has changed for me reading this new guidance.
Yeah. And I want to highlight we brought up RDOF a few moments ago, and the design in RDOF of a reverse auction, I think we'd be remiss to not identify that's what led it to be, seen
Right.
as actually a failure of a program. And
The
that's kind
lowest
of what we're
cost, the
heading to
lowest
right now.
cost, yeah, drive to the lowest cost has led us to the RDOF failures we're seeing.
And
Absolutely.
that's what we're looking at now.
Part of the RDOF failure was the fact that they required RDOF providers to provide phone service, and a lot of the companies that were
Mhm.
actually already covering those areas did not have that phone service in place 2 years ago, which is which eliminated a lot of companies and then from being able to bid.
Good point. Back to Gordon Fuller and satellites' vulnerability to certain sky events, be they solar flares or unfriendly nations interfering with satellite capability and space debris and all those other factors. Those space debris is not going to take out enough satellites necessarily, but an unfavored actor, could damage satellite capabilities more broadly. There is for the priority projects, the low cost scoring doesn't allow for any other consideration other than low cost. But when you have at least one proposal within 15% of the lowest in the secondary criteria, there's a time to market consideration, which satellites can excel at, though fixed wireless provider with infrastructure already in the area might also be quick to service. But there is also then the ability for states to weigh and score against the qualities of the technology. And so it's only when project areas fall into the secondary scoring criteria where the states now have new flexibility to figure out on their side that reliability and scalability of a fiber network can play in the state scoring on a TBD basis.
Hey, I wonder, hey Steve, just as a quick question, should we ask, are there any questions or just whole topic areas that we've completely missed that just other folks in the audience are would like to have covered? Because that would, I know we're consuming our hour very quickly
You
here.
you beat me to that, Randy. I was going to just get to that. I have a couple of quick comments and then want to open it up for any questions or comments that people have. We only have about 15 minutes left in our meeting today. Obviously, you can see that this is a very complex kind of issue. So two things. I want to remind people that the broadband office is having their webinar tomorrow, and would encourage you. I assume they're going to be more focused on what's happening in Arizona and the broadband office and so forth. So I would really encourage you to attend that webinar. And secondly is what Randy was just saying. Are there any questions, comments from the audience? I mean, we could probably go on, go on and on. As you can all see, this is really a complex issue. It's not just, oh, let's just make a few changes here and we'll go on our merry way. And of course, the biggest issue is the time frame that has been placed on the broadband office to be able to come up with a whole new plan. But anyway, I want to open it now to any questions or comments that people might have.
I have some questions. One is the whole area of unlicensed fixed wireless. What are the drawbacks of allowing those solutions? Because it seems to me when you have an unlicensed fixed wireless solution, it doesn't guarantee that you can provide reliable service in the future if someone.
Yeah, Randy, why don't you bring up that slide with add the criteria? They are requiring that they have multipath and interference and a minimum of 5 megabit per second dedicated per customer, scalable, and other factors like that. Randy, why don't you go through that in response?
Okay, and I see Rory is on the call too, and he actually had some oh, what's happening here? Let's see. Some great thoughts on that specifically as well. Let me just pull off here it is. Okay.
And Henry, I'll tell you that's what you just stated is unequivocally false. It's easy to engineer that in unlicensed.
No, I'm not talking about engineering. I'm talking about the fact that if you're unlicensed, they could make that spectrum available for auction in the future, for example. And then if some carrier buys that spectrum, then your service is no longer valid, or
I doubt that's going to happen, Henry. Not the Wi-Fi frequencies. You're talking about battling everybody in the world who uses it, and that's not realistic. And in fact, there's actually a push now to add 7 GHz into that spectrum too, because they found that the economic benefit to the U.S. is in the $100 billion plus range for Wi-Fi because they have opened up so many new companies and opportunities. So they're not going to give away the existing Wi-Fi frequencies. Whether they add more or not is that's going to be a political battle.
Right, but there is the
Rory,
new,
say
I think
something.
there is the new
the whole
6.
unlicensed thing, the reason it's unlicensed is because it's cheap and because you don't have to pay for a license. But if someone wants that spectrum and they request an auction be put on it to buy it, then your unlicensed coverage is no longer valid.
They can't just request an auction.
Yeah, it's way
that doesn't happen that way, Henry.
AT&T is trying to do that right now with CBRS, and it's an absolute war. There's just too much money against making existing changes. Wi-Fi itself is never going away because that's that spectrum is worldwide. Nobody's going to request it and take it away from, in the 2.456 gigahertz, that's pretty safe, at this point.
And Rory, say something about BABA and just equipment availability and the other stuff that you've mentioned that sort of is outside of the text, but is actually a big issue here.
So what they've listed, I'll start with the BABA requirement: Build America, Buy America, Build America. There is zero wireless equipment built in America right now in any product line that we use. It's built in Mexico, Lithuania, Manila, so forth, and obviously China. So I know some of the U.S. vendors, where even though their home offices and their core engineering is here in the U.S., the manufacturing is out of the country. I don't know how many of them are going to be able to get exceptions to this to the rule. The second part of that, I originally read the mitigating potential interference as being a requirement, and now I'm starting to think it's just a suggestion, in which case it won't affect it. It won't affect what we do. Everything we have covers most of those issues, or we have ones that are not even in here, and some techniques that are better than what they're suggesting. The real question is whether or not the Build America, Buy America is going to be the stopping point of that. If that is the case, where literally there will be no unlicensed vendors able to bid on this project. I will tell you, I'm working with 3 of them now, trying to find out where they stand on this.
I think this whole
I do.
unlicensed fixed
Sorry.
wireless thing needs to be debated because, I mean, this whole area is very nebulous in my opinion about what
Henry,
spectrum is needed.
can I stop you 1 second? Do you understand that we're also using 60 gigahertz spectrum, and that's not going to be ever covered by license? I mean, there's multiple frequencies involved in here.
Well, there's shortage of spectrum in the United States, so I don't know that what you're saying is correct.
No, Henry, yeah, this isn't the hill you want to battle on. There's other ones that are more important in this particular situation.
That's one aspect of it. Then the other aspect of it is you're saying in 7 days, these service providers have to claim these locations are being served by unlicensed wireless. And then is it 7 days the state has to
Present sufficient evidence. Yes.
We already have that in our BEAD filings. Every 6 months, it used to be every quarter, now it's every 6 months. All of that is already on file with federal government. There's nothing new that we have to do, Henry, except and it won't cover. We just won't be able to put new areas in, like Mark pointed out that they're using data from last year. So it's already on file. There's nothing special we have to do for that.
So
Excuse me, just a second. Randy, can you stop sharing? I want to go
You bet. Yeah, you bet.
to be able to
Sure.
share with everybody.
what is the extra 7 days for? What is the state going to do in those 7 days after the unlicensed wireless providers?
There'll be a 7-day window for wireless providers to respond and attempt to claim their BSL service locations to take them out of the BEAD eligible map. And then having done that, they'll have 7 days to provide quote unquote, air quotes, notice, evidence that they do serve those locations adequately. And that may be
Then the
propagation.
state has to evaluate all that, right, to determine
They,
if
they, they, they largely already have. These are customer areas they're serving. They have propagation maps. They're going to have to write a couple of page narrative about why they meet those few technical proposals with the equipment they have. They're probably going to have to package up their existing propagation maps. They may have UCLA or other speed testing from real customers in those areas. Right? These are areas they're serving. They'll have the data already. And if they're smart, they'll have, worked on packaging it in advance, not waiting for that 7 day window.
Yeah, but doesn't the state have to confirm that all this evidence is correct?
Sure, but
Well, Mark,
these are declared on the FCC map. The state had no input on the original FCC map other than the challenge process. There will not be another challenge process. So if it's on the FCC map, declared and registered there, you're right. The state will have to review the evidence provided, could object to it, but likely not likely to.
So then they'll have to redefine all their project areas, won't they, based on?
No, they'll have to have different numbers of BSLs. Added ones from RDOF and other failures will come into the map, and claimed unlicensed wireless locations will come out of the map. But I imagine the project areas will remain the 67 in Arizona identical.
One interesting piece that I think the broadband offices will need to think about is a particular applicant can look at one of these project areas and say, I'll take all of these urban pieces, but I'm going to decline to cover these other 10 areas that would have cost a ton of money. So that's something that I know, in a lot of states have carved out project areas that have a mixture of urban and remote, with the idea of getting everything covered with fiber. So that philosophy of how you approach the mapping process is suddenly under fire a little bit.
Right. There's no guidance here other than low cost about, if someone claims an urban area at a lower cost and not the surrounding areas, but then someone claims them all at a higher cost, what is the process of differentiating and discerning and deciding between two proposals like that? Great point, Randy. I think
They haven't even said that you have to serve the whole project area. They said you can exclude locations.
They've relaxed those rules.
Right.
So the project areas are not really very relevant because you don't have to serve the whole project area. You only have to serve certain locations that you decide you want to serve. So how are they going to assign who wins a project area?
I believe the state is going to have to propose their processes and their decision matrix and how they're going to evaluate and compare projects like that as part of their response to this guidance. I believe every state will have to do that.
So I need to interrupt because I need to know if there's any other questions or comments from others. Henry, I know you've got a lot of good questions, but we've only got about 4 minutes left in this meeting. And so I need to see if there's any other questions or comments from others. I take that to not be the case.
Okay. Henry, more questions then.
Well, I mean, I have, like I said, I think there's a lot of questions about what these project areas really mean, or because they're not required to be served. There's a lot of questions about how you identify unlicensed fixed wireless issues that are not being discussed properly, in my opinion, because there's a lot of concern about the reliability of this in the future. and what the spectrum allocation issues are. There's there are whole issues about whether this whole process is going to be litigated because it
Well,
violates what was
that's a
originally
good point. Or whether
specified in
states will have some waiver capabilities within the process, what the litigation. That's a great point, Henry, is that we're bound to see litigation relative to this.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very confused situation, in my opinion. All these states, whether they want to go ahead with this rushed 90-day process where they don't know answers to these questions, and or whether they want to have this litigated before they go ahead with a new process, because there's a lot of, it seems to me it's being rushed, like Reed is saying, with all sorts of uncertainties and
We're all nodding our heads, Henry. We don't have the clear answers. The states don't have the clear answers. It's going to be sausage making, and we're going to watch it. We're going to watch it roll out the next 90 days.
And
Absolutely.
I think one last piece on the timeline is it's not only going to be it's not only difficult for states, that 90-day period, but NTIA has given themselves 90 days to adjudicate it all. So that and that hasn't been the case in
Right.
Prior approval processes for the initial proposals or the final proposals. It's taken much longer than 90 days. So there's uncertainty both at the state and federal level for this.
So can I interrupt because we're almost out of time? Frank Martinez, I know you're online. Do you have anything in regard to what you're seeing in regard to the tribes at this point in time?
Are you talking about for BEAD specifically?
Yep, for what's happening right now.
I think Okasana might be on the. Was she on the call earlier?
She was,
She
but I
would
don't
probably be.
think she's still here.
Yeah, I don't have anything recent or current to add to what's already been published. She would probably
Okay,
be the best person for Arizona that I would point to.
okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, so any other questions, comments before we end for today? So again,
One thing, Steve, I do want to go back to the environmental that Randy raised. They are offering an unprecedented, and to Reed's point about their responsiveness, they are saying that with their new mapping tool and data sets, they expect to be able to clear 90% of the BEAD projects for environmental in 2 weeks. This is unprecedented and a little unbelievable. I mean, it would be welcomed by the provider community. It may not be welcomed by some environmental, advocates, but that also is a unprecedented sea change in how environmental may work versus historically.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
couple of quick things again. Tomorrow, I assume Nick is going to be on that call tomorrow and talking about Arizona, and we'll kind of see where things are. And I'll talk with Nick, and maybe we'll see if we can get him also as early as next week. It's just everything is time critical at this point in time. So I'll see if he might be available next week because it's important to know what the state's plan is at this point in time. Any other closing comments before we move on?
Really appreciate the discussion today. Learned a lot. Thanks for having
Great.
me.
Well, thank you, Randy, Reed, and Mark. You guys did a great job today. It was a great panel. So you guys were awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.